Call to order the Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Ed meeting, September 23, 2019. Welcome, everyone. I will kick it off with passing it over to Dr. Henry Piedmont for some announcements.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Sunheim, Board Trustees, and all of our public. There are just a few announcements that hopefully will engage you and will certainly lead to you participating in a number of them. First and foremost, on this week, on the 24th, we have the Policy Committee meeting. It'll be here in the district office at 10:30 a.m. And the public is invited to attend that. On the also on the same day, the high school senior parent night is at 7 p.m. We have on the 25th the Newcomers Dinner at Hillside Elementary, which is really awesome. I hear it's a wonderful event for parents who are new to the community. That's at 6:30. On the 26th, we have our E&L Parent Night, which is also at Hillside at 6:30. On the 27th, we have, again, another wonderful event at the high school, which is the Club Fair. And we round into our holidays, Rosh Hashanah, on September 30th and October 1st. For all of those of you who observe, I guess it's the high holidays. High holidays. So that will, and there's some additional events going into next week, so I'll hold off on those, but they do include other audit committees, so this information is a part of our agendas, and it's also part of our happenings, which are posted and emailed to all of you who are subscribers, and we hope that you take a look at those. Obviously, a big event coming up next week is the homecoming weekend. And homecoming week events. There's some activities every day, or a game every day, culminating on the weekend with some major activities that, again, we hope everyone comes out and participates in, because it's quite wonderful, and it's another opportunity to celebrate. I also want to celebrate and acknowledge the first day of fall. So we say goodbye to wonderful summer and hello to fall and all the changing of the leaves, which is also very beautiful, all the foliage changes. I also wanted to bring to your attention a project that Mr. Nauer, who has been slaving over for the longest, which is our happenings, Hastings Happenings, which will be mailed this week, and it contains this is our back-to-school edition. Lots of great stories about the school district and all the wonderful activities that are occurring. From I want to thank our administrators in advance who are here, who are also going to be sharing some of those. We have photos of all of our new educators who we were able to hire. So we're really proud of this edition, and we look forward to at least 4 other editions throughout the year. Again, showcasing all the wonderful things that are happening here in Hastings. Thank you.
So I will pass it back over to Valerie, you and your team, for some administrative comments.
Absolutely. Sure. Just a quick update. So we did a Google training this week. So the middle school and high school faculty members engaged in the Google training sessions during the Friday late start, and the administrators were trained later in the day. We had a drop-in clinic also that was available to folks to have some personalized one-on-one. And Hillside faculty members will be trained on October 2nd, and then we'll have another round that will be specific to TAs, aides, and custodians, and that is anticipated to be during the November half-days. Also, additional drop-in clinics will be available. Feedback from the faculty had actually requested certain things that were targeted around some of the applications within the Google Suite, so I'm looking to customize that for everyone and make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs as we transition to Google. Around curriculum instruction and assessment, there have been lots of recent meetings with the math department and the science department, and those meetings have been very energizing, very focused on the work ahead. I'm very impressed by the faculty here and their commitment to students and moving the work forward. Peer leadership is now underway, and so I had the opportunity to meet with Jeff Connoisseur to understand the program at Hastings and the long history it's had here. And then we had the opportunity to visit and see it in action and see some of the team building games that the seniors were engaged in with the freshmen. So that was very exciting. Back to school nights, having the opportunity to attend was really wonderful. We got to meet many members of the community. And I've also been working with Janice, with Laura, with BOCES to design and strengthen a process for securing translation services beyond the special education department and really streamlining that so that we make that more readily available to our families for students who are English language learners.
Okay, so just give you a little bit of a technology update. We're continuing to work on gathering some of the comments we got on our last audit, the technology audit. One of the pieces that we were vulnerable in, it was our overall our inventorying of items and just being able to ensure that all the items that we have a very strong replacement schedule, and that's like tied to our budget process. So I met with the Lyric team today and our internal technology team, and they have started. That was prioritized that was of critical importance because just in terms of making decisions and understanding. For our long-term with the one-to-one initiatives and many of our technology, our overall planning and how's this tied to budget, that process had to start earlier, and we are tightening up that process. Another piece of the technology audit, last year we did get some comments back. I think I had mentioned to the board about the cybersecurity and if in fact we were compromised, what our insurance would cover. And I did meet with the insurance representative last week and actually have a much better understanding of the coverage we do have. And the good thing is we did, which I didn't even remember doing it, but I guess a couple years ago we decided to take the higher limits on some of the cyber and the data provisions that would not only cover the restoration of our data, would also protect us in terms of a breach. So we would have legal protection if people were to sue us for their information being sold. But we are also, the insurance reciprocal in general, although the limits are higher, looking even to make those potentially higher and looking at some additional insurance that may be a benefit to the district as we look. And they were looking at our processes, and they wanted, I want to share with him some things just to kind of get a sense of where we may need some additional coverage to ensure that we're properly taken care of. Another piece that we just got the bids back on Friday was our geotechnical RFP that we issued, and this is tied to the bond. So we hope to have some of that testing, which will give us better insight as we look to talk about the work at Hillside. So the bids, it looks as though it's about $8,000, which is better than I thought it would be. So that's good news, and that work should commence in the next couple weeks. So we'll let the board know. We'll let you know well in advance when they're going to be on site, and hopefully they won't find much rock as we had planned for. And that's about it for me. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Could we just go back to a little bit of a gallery of photos? I want to thank again Janine for making this possible. Some of these did appear in our happenings as well as our back-to-school newsletter, but we just wanted to highlight a few photos that were, I think, really reminiscent of a lot of the really excellent work that's happening in the school district. So we have an advanced geology project that's underway, so if you wanted to take a look at the screen. So a number of our students went on a mini field trip to the Burke Estate, and to look at the rock formations and erosion and bedrock that's right here in our community. So it's an awesome opportunity to kind of apply their skills to real-world exploration and investigation. Another opportunity, again, associated with a wonderful way that our K-4 building participated in the global climate strike. So there was a book reading, Winston Churchill book, One Bear's Battle Against Global Warming, which was a wonderful choice made. I want to thank Amy and John for making that possible. Again, great appropriate activities there, as well as wonderful activities. Again, Melissa and Lou, thank you for the wonderful activities that occurred in the courtyard with the environmental class, the environmental club class, or club, And then at the middle school, thank you both Chris and Gail for making possible this group of students who were actually listening to the young lady who was responsible, the student who was responsible for making this, a project that, sort of caught, the attention across the world. And so this group of students were basically outlining their carbon handprint and footprint. So it was a really awesome opportunity for our students to kind of do something to be a part of the experience while being here in school. So I want to thank all those administrators for making that possible. Again, as another wonderful recognition for our amazing theater program, we had the guest here associated with our American musical Hairspray. Again, students having access to these very talented members of the community, which is really great. 7 high school students named as a National Merit students or finalists, and again, we're really proud of all the students and all the work and all the hands that go into supporting these youngsters, including obviously their wonderful parents. Alexander qualifies for the National Merit Scholarship semifinalist. Again, a wonderful student who you can see, he's so happy, and he epitomizes the kinds of students that are who walk the halls daily, at the high school, and certainly have walked through the entire district from Hillside all the way through Farragut. So that concludes our just a little sort of a few highlights again of some of the amazing things that happened throughout the course of the school week from the last board meeting, and we'll continue to bring these forward as a way of just again, continuously celebrating all the wonderful accomplishments of our students and all the hard work of all of our administrators and our faculty and staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Okay, I want to pass it over to our students who have both elected to come. We give them the option to trade off, but you both wanted to come, so that's wonderful. And as much as you want to do that, that's great. Anything to report?
So the past 2 weeks have been pretty eventful. We had the climate march, or the climate rally, which was exciting. A lot of people came out to the courtyard, and we wrote letters to Elliot Engel, Kirsten Gillibrand, Chuck Schumer, and Nita Lowy. And it was great to write down all these thoughts that we're having and actually send them to people that can make a difference. The Environmental Club was talking about maybe going to the elementary school or the middle school and having those students write letters to our representatives as well. Also, homework is, really picking up, but we have homecoming soon, so people are excited to have something to look forward to. And the juniors have junior formal on November 4th, so planning is underway.
No, yeah, the first 2 weeks really a big success. And in addition to this, we also have the climate march. I'm pretty sure is happening again this Friday, as I'm pretty sure they're doing it again in the courtroom, in the courtyard. So it was a success of doing it again.
Well, I just want to say that I know that you have a lot of educational opportunities. One is watching board meetings. The other is going home and studying. So we will leave it up to you when you want to stay and go. You're free to stay as long as you like, but we won't be offended if you get up and leave at any point during the meeting. So thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it over to the public for public comment. Again, please keep comments to 3 minutes. State whether you're a resident of Hastings. And I'll pass it over to the public. Okay, no takers. All right, so we've got some really great presentations, and the first one is been put together by
Our leadership team.
the whole leadership team, which we're happy to have the leadership from every building here to talk a little bit about high-level goals for the year and what you're focusing on. So we look forward to hearing, and pass it over to Valerie for you to kick things off. Or
Sure. Do you want to use that one?
Yeah.
Yes, just use that one. Okay.
you have the home for some reason.
It's, yeah, we took this one out. difficulties, which we're working on. So one of the things that we, and this is also available on board docs, but as soon as we can, we'll get the presentation up. I apologize for that. We rehearsed for this to work, right? We did. We did. So I want to thank all the administrators who are here this evening because they're responsible for contributing to this K-12 presentation that just gives you a sense of not only how they're organizing around the goals of the board's objectives as well as the superintendent's goals, but also their own goals as they pertain to some of the important work that's been underway for a while. So this didn't just start. So what you hear this evening did just start. It's been underway. And what we wanted to do here is to give you a sense of how we are moving forward to present the work from the standpoint of the K-12 system. So the board objectives and the superintendent's goals were articulated a few board meetings ago. And the goals are organized around priorities that not only were the board interested in and made it a point to punctuate those as directions for the coming year, but also various stakeholders that we spoke to as we met as we came into the school district said very similar things with regards to what our school system needed to work on. And one of the major priorities was, as I started, developing this understanding of a K-12 continuum of teaching and learning across Hastings and ensuring that as a superintendent and assistant superintendent and all of our leaders that we focused on that and we worked collaboratively through review of curriculum and student data, instructional practices, and across administrative teams and teachers and departments. That was a major priority. The other was community engagement and ensuring that from the standpoint of being a new superintendent as well as new assistant superintendent, that we really got to know the community and that we honored the fact that we couldn't come in and not spend a great deal of time trying to get an understanding and pay attention to all the community stakeholders, as well as find ways to do that naturally. So we're making sure that through book studies and monthly meetings or opportunities to hear directly from our community certain ideas and suggestions they may have, as well as newsletters. And certainly our first effort at that is our back to school newsletter. So we certainly are engaged in making sure that takes place. Updating our website, which is obviously underway. We'll be bringing information soon with regards to that. So that again, we're listening to you. We're making sure that we are restructuring that so that it makes more sense to our community so they can more easily find things. Podcast and short videos is another endeavor that I'm really interested in pursuing and engaging with our administrators and others, our department chairs and our other members of our leadership team, informal leadership team. And again, attending lots of events that where parents are so that, again, they can see what's occurring and I can see what's occurring and be another venue to listen and hear them and hear from them. Another important goal pertains to just regular meetings with administrators, and they'll tell you that we've had a rich array of meetings since the school year started. We kicked off. They're laughing because it really is a rich array of meetings. We spend a lot of face time together, but that's how we are developing our sense of team and our sense of a K-12 continuum. We have to sort of spend time developing that relationship, and so that's what we're doing. So we're implementing norms and processes and learning to call things the same thing, using the same language and vocabulary, the practices, so that we really get our hands around how the system operates and functions, and most importantly, it functions coherently. Meaning that all of us individually and collectively understand the work at a deep level, and that we all know the purpose behind all the work. And obviously a big part of the work has to do with making sure that we educate the public about the construction bond, and that Maureen and I are looking forward to developing a budget university so that again, we can educate the public before the budget process starts in January about the components of the budget that we don't have a lot of control over, but those things are really important to understand before we get to the actual budget. So with that said, everyone in the system, is part of a team, and all the gears in the system have to be turning sort of, in the same direction in order for it to function effectively and for us to all do the work in a way that, we are adding to and making sure that those cards work. Thank you so much. So we are at this slide. Oops.
Back there.
Okay, we have version control problems too. So everyone is working together to make sure that the system is serving the needs of the children, and that we all are on the same page, and we're also collectively using each other's talents and skills to do that. So the rest of this presentation is all about illustrating those connections across K-12 and how all the work is, in service to understanding how, the needs of students and understanding, early on, way before there are gaps or issues that are become insurmountable, that we are working together to do that and working smartly to do that. So that's what you're going to hear in the presentation, is a sense of coherence, the sense of a K-12 alignment, and this sense of really paying attention to making sure that we are a strong, cohesive team.
So the position of Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction is a new position for the district, and it's unique in that the position provides leadership to support both up and down the system. So in my role, my efforts will be dedicated to supporting the Board of Education objectives, the superintendent goals, and also the goals of the leadership teams. More specifically, it means that my efforts this year will be really focused on developing and cultivating trusting, collaborative relationships with stakeholders throughout the system, because without that, absolutely nothing can happen. As outlined by Valerie when she first began in her teaching and learning goal, I will be working to develop an understanding of the K-12 continuum of teaching and learning in Hastings, with the short-term goal of understanding the instruction and assessment practices of teachers and department chairs and administrators, and the ultimate long-term goal of establishing horizontal and vertical articulation throughout the system, honoring the fact that we are in a system where there is a high level of autonomy, and thinking about what are the through lines across grade levels, across content areas, and across the K-12 system. So as an integral part of my entry plan, I had the opportunity to listen to a variety of different stakeholders in partnership with Valerie since July 1st. And what emerged was a real desire for this role to be an opportunity for people to have assistance to make decisions around resources, to think about connections across the system, and also a way to make decisions more efficiently. Another key idea that emerged from talking to people is that there is a real need to support the system with looking at data. And typically when professionals enter the field of education, they do so with a really deep commitment to embracing the whole child. And one of the things that is very important is to recognize that that ideal, and also this idea of looking and analyzing data, looking at and analyzing that, are not two mutually exclusive things. The data is an opportunity, sort of like a neon flashing sign to say, look at me, I'm important. It points the direction of where to go. And when looking at the whole child, it really rounds out thinking about what may be the best entry points and the areas of strengths to capitalize upon to help move children and the system in general forward. So that will be an area of focus for me. This year, for example, we were flagged at the middle school level for potential target status under ESSA for the progress of students with disabilities and for the progress of economically disadvantaged students. And under ESSA, it's no longer about schools and districts meeting adequate yearly progress. There are now 10 groups that we need to be paying very, very close attention to for multiple indicators and across multiple years. So those groups are all students, Asian Pacific Islander, Black, economically disadvantaged, English language learners, Hispanic, multiracial, American Indian, Alaska Native, students with disabilities, and white. So data literacy has now become particularly critical. And so as an initial step in this process, each of the leadership teams will be presenting tonight goals that they've selected for the school year based off of data that has really pointed the way to their decision making. There are a number of successes for Hastings to celebrate, and also some really important areas for us to be focusing on.
Good evening, and I'm very excited tonight to be here to present on behalf of Hillside Elementary. So I'm going to start off by sharing our administrative goals. This is the third year of our 5-year balanced literacy initiative. The first years 1 and 2, we focused on reading. So this is our third year, and we are ready for writing. So we are super excited about writing and beginning the work with our teachers. So our goal this year around writing is to really focus on the professional learning opportunities for our teachers and prepare them for this aligned curriculum and aligned instruction that's going to roll out throughout the year. And then personally, I'm going to look to really increase the involvement in the writing curriculum and instruction and assessment by looking at portfolio assessment with our teachers and our students, looking at a beginning of the unit piece of writing as compared to an end of the unit piece of writing to be able to determine both the areas of growth and celebration and also the areas for next steps.
Good evening, everyone. For my personal goal, there's a lot of great things that happen at Hillside each and every day. So my focus will be on increasing contingent rewards at Hillside for both students and staff members moving forward. For students, recognizing both individual students and whole classes for meeting expected behaviors in school. And also for staff members, recognizing and highlighting accomplishments individually amongst their peers.
So when we looked at some of our data, we were really excited to share this piece. And this is our student reading survey data. We had polled our students in the spring of 2017 before we brought in balanced literacy. And then we polled them again in the spring of 2019, 2 years after rolling out the first 2 years of the reading instruction. And the first question that we asked was, how do you feel about reading in school? In 2017, we had 122 students respond, and in 2019, we more than doubled that with 246 students responding. What was especially exciting to us was that our number of students who loved reading doubled, and our number of students who liked reading doubled, but our number of students who did not like reading did not double. We were really excited about that. The other piece that I'm sharing with you tonight is in regard to how often do you read at home. Again, we looked in 2017, we had 120 students respond, and then again in 2019, more than double, 246 students responded. And what was extremely exciting for us is that in 2017, you see the number of children that read 7 days a week as compared to the number in 2019, more than quadrupled. So that was really exciting for us as well. So this year we are rolling out year 1 of writing, and this is our third year in our balanced literacy rollout. So the first piece that I wanted to share with you tonight is about the curriculum design. And this summer our teachers worked with our consultant team to create units of study for each grade level. So every grade level now has 5 aligned units of study that have units that incorporate the 3 different kinds of writing that are in the standards. So every single grade level has narrative writing, informative writing, and opinion writing. And all of those units are aligned, so they have goals that grow from year to year vertically. In addition, we have been working on unit rollout. So our consultants come to school and spend time with our teachers in cycles where they roll out 1 unit at a time. And what's really exciting about the unit rollout is that we spend time together as teams
looking at the unit, understanding the different aspects of the unit, and then going into classrooms where the consultant models for the teachers some of the instructional practices, and you can see that in the picture on the left-hand side. And then the teachers have a chance to try it out, and that's a picture in the middle that you can see our teachers trying it out side by side with the students. And finally, you see in the last picture, our students' writing and writers workshop, because what we know is that the more our students write, the better they're going to get at it. And we're going to see a large volume of writing this year at Hillside. In addition, our time spent together with our consultant is spent on developing the other pieces for the units. So pieces like mini lessons and book suggestions and parent communication, all of that comes in the work together with our consultant team. This year, our big focal points are focusing on the mini lesson, on the conferring to really individualize instruction, and then on the share as well. So all of those pieces are happening this year in Writing Workshop.
One of our other initiatives at Hillside over the last several years has been PBIS, which is Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. Before PBIS existed at Hillside, there were more piecemeal approaches that existed that were reactive instead of proactive. Over the last several years, the team has worked very hard to establish and maintain a continuum of positive behavior supports, and we continue to teach into those expected behaviors that are now displayed, as you can see up to the left there, on signage in various areas in the building. Under MTSS, under Tier 1, we have expectation signage, school-wide recognition, and social-emotional skill teaching through Second Step, which is our SEL program. Under Tier 2, social skill groups, daily check-ins with individual students, and classroom behavior interventions, which are all supported by Mrs. Snyder, our school counselor. And under Tier 3, we have more specific interventions and support put into place to address behavior concerns for individual students. If we can refer to the slide, I know it's tough to see, but one of the pictures to the left, the one on the right-hand side, that's our cafeteria signage that is now currently hanging up in our cafe. And what you'll notice is it's a visual reminders of what the students should be doing, not rules of what not to do. So for instance, it says use your time to eat your lunch and clean up after, use indoor voices, so it's okay to socialize, but at a certain tone, listen to adult directions, walk at all times, and ask for permission to leave your seat. So just one example of one of the posters that we have hanging up in our school now. And then also to the right of the slide there, we have student and staff recognition programs which we'll be rolling out, and actually have started a few so far this year. One being in the cafeteria for our lunchbox challenge, where classes will be recognized for meeting expected behaviors in the cafeteria. Similar to that, we have our hallway certificates that will be handed out by 2 classes and their teachers. Positive referral forms. Anytime that we hear of a referral, we think in negative terms. So what the staff has been asked to do is to recognize students and hand in these referrals to either myself or Amy, and we will be reaching out to parents and guardians to share the good news. And then also for our staff, we have our Works of Heart, which again is recognizing staff members for their work this year. For example, during our first faculty meeting, teachers that were opening up their classroom to new staff members to observe lessons being delivered, recognizing teachers for their flexibility with room usage, because we know space is a concern always at Hillside, and also teachers using our new school theme to create interactive lessons for their students.
So one of the most exciting things about Hillside is the fact that we're always growing as an inclusive community. And we really promote inclusivity at Hillside. We know with Maslow's hierarchy of needs that it's very important for kids to feel safe and to feel a sense of belonging. And with that, they'll be able to reach the higher levels of esteem and self-actualization. So some of the things that we have implemented already include the 4th grade safety patrol. That's a program that's only for our 4th graders, and it's for all. Any 4th grader who's so inclined will have the opportunity to be a safety patrol member who is outside during morning recess and afternoon recess. Their job is to greet students, help students to feel included, organize games, as you can see in the lower picture, and they are just a wonderful, wonderful asset to our Hillside community. Another aspect of our inclusive community is our school theme. Each year, one of our students comes up with our school theme, and this really promotes unity. And you can see in the bottom picture a picture of our staff from last year. Last year, our theme had to do with flowers, and everybody dressed in that theme. And that was a really nice way to bring together not only our staff, but we also invite our students, and everybody feels like they are a part of. Another area that we've worked on to be more inclusive is with our diverse book initiative. We've worked to have more than 1,000 books brought into the school that are in our classroom libraries and our school library that give our students the opportunity to both see themselves and see others. So that's been a really exciting aspect of our work as well. We also make it a priority to make sure that our classrooms are as inclusive as possible. So that means that every single child in our school is part of one of our mainstream classes and a valued member of each class as well. And then lastly, this year we're looking forward to a new program called One Book, One School. We're working with Jamie Nedrick, our librarian, to be able to organize a program where all students at Hillside will be reading one book together as a community.
We're going to continue our work through MTSS as it pertains to attendance this year. Continue to work with and build relationships with families to discuss absences and tardies, and really stress the importance that it's not so much about excused versus unexcused absences, but it's about missed instructional time when students are out. Through our interventions, as I mentioned before, both Tier 2 and Tier 3, continuing to support students' sense of belonging and value at Hillside. In addition, school-wide assemblies and classroom guidance lessons on strategies that build resilience, self-control, empathy, and persistence, which are all recognized as focal points under ESSA. And lastly, continuing our end-of-year celebration to acknowledge good attendance at a school-wide assembly.
And finally, our theme this year is just like paints on a palette, we all make the picture complete. And you can see by the pictures up on the screen that Hillside, we really promote individualized instruction, we promote critical thinking, innovation, connection, positive relationships, student-centered learning, joy, a little bit of silliness, and most importantly, love. Thank you.
Well, when you end with love, it's we're looking ahead at 2019-2020 with great enthusiasm. It's really been delightful to work with Valerie and Melissa and partnering up on the important work and initiatives that we'll be moving towards this year.
In addition to the 129 fifth graders we welcomed at the beginning of September, we also welcomed 17 new students from across the country. In fact, you'll see some photographs from our new student luncheon on the side of the slide.
September brings the opportunity to reflect and to set goals. Goals aligned with Waters and Cameron's balanced leadership framework. Culture is an area that Waters and Cameron describe as a leader's responsibility to foster shared beliefs and a sense of community and cooperation. Promoting a sense of well-being, cohesion among staff, and developing a sense of purpose are all associated practices with this responsibility. Mindfulness meets at this intersection. We continue our work with staff at faculty meetings. We'll share the mindfulness work that we're doing at PTSA meetings to communicate our use of it in school and to foster a partnership so that mindfulness practices can support students on all fronts.
Waters and Cameron also say it is the responsibility of the school leader to optimize, inspiring, and leading new and challenging innovations. Last year, our work with the Holocaust Human Rights and Education Center brought Judith Altman to our school. Through that work, we also learned about a leadership program that they have for 7th graders. So I coordinated with our counselor and our team coordinators to identify aspiring student leaders. We're developing a program grounded in Community Circles framework to inspire a shared sense of community and shared leadership. My goal this year will be to lead that initiative.
School-wide, our goal will focus on subgroups that we will identify in upcoming slides. Review of our New York State assessment data revealed areas of focus for us as a school community, particularly in the areas of mathematics. Student subgroups that the state has identified as economically disadvantaged requires additional analysis and concentrated focus.
We will rely on the collaboration of district leaders, teachers, counselors, and interventionists to monitor progress by reviewing data, conducting data dive meetings, and reviewing cases with our student support team.
We are delighted to celebrate our region's pass rate. 100% of our students passed algebra, 95% of our students passed earth science.
Ms. Pack and Mr. Mialescu hosted our first math Olympiads. We had one in January and one in June, and we had almost 45 math enthusiasts participate.
Congratulations to Ms. Perez for earning National Board certification. After years of coursework, reflection, assessment, and review, Ms. Perez joined the top 3% of educators in all of New York. She's only the 20th counselor in the state to receive this distinction.
And although that photograph speaks for itself, Bea and Amanda came in first place at the Tri-County Science and Technology Fair. They focused on racial and gender bias in different generations. They conducted research in collaboration with our Courageous Conversations classes. It's a terrific example of students using scientific inquiry to address social injustice.
And to our focus on the Courageous Conversations classes. As previously stated in our goals, we began the year by reviewing math assessment data. Some noticings include the total tested from 2018 to 2019 showed an increase of 37 students. Level 1 remained the same. Level 2 saw an increase. Level 3 saw a decrease.
Level 4, however, increased from 93 students to 132 students. This is an increase of 42%. And while we celebrate the increases in Level 4, we are certainly cognizant of the students who are scoring in 1 and 2 and are focusing on looking at those youngsters so we can provide additional supports and interventions.
Among those youngsters who we are looking at more closely include students that have been identified by New York State as economically disadvantaged or having a disability. As you heard earlier, ESSA breaks students into 10 groups that prompt us to look closer at each of these subgroups. You'll see the total tested in these groups is much smaller, but so is the proficiency rate.
Clearly the needs in this area are great and demand our focused attention. Again, we're working with our interventionists, teachers, counselors, and district leaders on examining these issues. We are currently collecting and analyzing data, developing portfolios, and engaging in deep data dives.
Our goal is to target our interventions and to individualize the instruction. We need to understand how these students experience learning, and we need to support their achievement and their growth.
In supporting our students, both our general education and special education teachers are working with consultants from GNR. This year we're focusing on inclusion. Co-teaching pairs of teachers are either being coached in classes through observations or they're working with a consultant during meetings.
As you know, the Courageous Conversation classes have been in the middle school for the past many years. This is the third year of implementation, so teachers worked over the summer to develop the final capstone year. It is project-based, it is action research, it talks about how to be an upstander, and it is linked to social justice.
With the next generation science standards on their way, we've recently designed a science laboratory that will be used by our fifth graders. In addition, teachers met over the summer to craft hands-on, minds-on lessons aligned to the new standards. Melissa Shandroff has been critical in helping us prepare for this upcoming shift.
Through the generosity of SEPTA and the PTSA, our general education and special education teachers have signed up for courses beginning this fall at Windward. We have about 11 teachers at this point, as well as Mr. Keogh and myself, attending workshops. These include topics such as working memory, study skills, mindfulness, expository writing, and multisensory math strategies. Again, a special thank you to SEPTA and the PTSA for their support in helping us to reach all of our learners.
Lastly, our continued work on MTSS is expanded with the introduction of new structures, processes, and procedures. As you may be aware, MTSS is an umbrella that encompasses two very important areas of a student's day. On the left, you'll see the ways in which we address academic concerns, and on the right, you'll see the ways in which we address social, emotional, and behavioral concerns.
Under the umbrella of academic concerns, a teacher will deliver core instruction with necessary differentiation. Periodic assessments will be administered, both formally and informally, to identify areas of need. As a result, interventions will be targeted to support those needs, those areas. All the while, multiple data points are being collected. If interventions prove unsuccessful, classroom teachers will bring this documentation and history to our MTSS committee. The committee meeting will include various school representatives to help determine additional interventions targeted to the area of need, evaluating whether or not a student needs to be referred to another intervention tier.
And similar to the academic steps, for social, emotional, and behavioral concerns, teachers will manage classrooms and differentiate accordingly. Teachers can discuss concerns with the student's counselor or the student's case manager, all the while collecting data that will enrich conversations should this child need to be referred to a more structured tier. Our SST, our student support team, will meet to review progress, analyze data, and determine appropriate next steps and interventions. The team will ultimately decide whether or not interventions are successful and whether or not a student can be brought to a different tier.
Because we focus on the whole child, wellness remains at the core of our work here at FMS. As mentioned previously, we will continue our work in the area of mindfulness.
Over the summer, I took a course in community circles. I've already begun introducing some of those elements to our faculty through faculty meetings, and we'll be integrating much of what I learned into the leadership development program I mentioned earlier. Community circles are really some of the first steps we can take towards restorative justice, forming really the tier 1 basis of that response.
Early collaboration with Mark Brackett began with my attendance at the Mindfulness Summit in Washington, D.C. We continue our work with the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. All of our 5th graders will be introduced to the mood meter. Support staff and administration use the mood meter in sessions with students, and teachers use the mood meter on an as-needed basis.
And much like Hillside, we continue to work with PBIS. Ms. Frank, our PBIS coordinator, is developing the PBIS program further, trying to find the types of incentives kids are interested in. And in fact, she's inviting students onto the committee for the first time this year. We are also delighted that the Hastings Education Foundation has awarded us 2 fantastic opportunities. One is to bring back John Halligan, who will speak to grades 5 through 8 on the topics of depression and bullying. He'll also speak with families in the evening. Mr. Halligan spoke to our community about 7 or 8 years ago. It was a really well-received presentation. In fact, he received an email from a student who was in on the presentation a couple of years later that he forwarded to me to talk about some of the effects of his talk. The other event that the HEF has graciously funded is our Courageous Conversations lecture series. Right now, our Race Matters Committee is in the process of securing speakers, and they're looking to further explore issues of diversity.
Wellness Day is an exciting new program that was developed and initiated by teachers, 5th grade teachers, who were seeking to find ways to bring families into the classroom earlier in the year. Wellness Day and Wellness Wednesdays, there'll be more information to follow. And I think I ended on a very awkward note. Is that it?
That is it. And now for the high school.
Oops, sorry. Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone, Valerie and Melissa. It's been really a pleasure having leadership and having moving forward. So we've worked, I have to be honest, we've worked on this together, and we've, in my 15 years here, we've never done a project like this. And there were some aha moments, because it's really hard from the high school principal to know what's happening at Hillside and Farragut, and putting this all in a room, it really was enlightening. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Hastings High School welcomed over 520 students on day one. It was probably one of the highlights, because it's depression the night before when we have to go back to school, and then we see our kids' faces and we light up again. So
They actually enjoyed seeing us.
They actually liked us.
For me, it's a phenomenon. This is one area.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our goals. We'll go backwards. We'll talk about our professional goal. Some of the data that we're going to be using here is some of the data that we used for challenge success that I presented at here last year. One of our professional goals this year is to really look at the development of an advisory program within the high school grade 9 through 12 and how that folds in with our peer leadership program as well. You'll see in some of the data that we present in subsequent slides that students do have some connection to our high school, but depending on the grade that they're in, they don't know if they have an adult that they can go to. I think that's important data for us to know. I also want to look at a different starting schedule for our school, with the work with the middle school, and maybe getting a little bit of a late start in school, maybe a half hour in the morning. We'll talk about sleep. So we want to explore different programs and make a recommendation to the superintendent and to the Board of Ed sometime in the spring of 2020. Myself, personally, I know I'm a rigid person in nature. It's hard to convince me of things when I put my feet down. So I think one of my personal goals is to really listen, to use data, to talk to people, and look for innovative and new ways of rolling out initiatives and doing things. We need to evolve as educators, and I think that's something that I really want to work on personally.
Also, in that spirit of collaboration, I'm going to be focusing on two different areas. First of all, I've received much feedback from the students about the study hall structure, the rigid study hall structure. So we're working on a pilot program right now. We're working with the teachers who advise the study hall periods and having them work with Ms. Gracia and her library staff to bring the kids there. So it's a much more enriching experience for them rather than just sitting around in a classroom, and it also is going to keep the nice quiet hallways that we enjoy. So we're working on that pilot, working with staff and students. I also want to focus on the issue of vaping and juuling, which is a serious issue both at the middle and the high school level. So we'll be working collaboratively with our colleagues at the middle school in formalizing some disciplinary consequences and structure there, but more importantly, being proactive and developing some educational pieces. We've incorporated a lot of that into our Family U, but I'll talk about that a little bit later.
So I think it's important to just go through some of the data we went through last year with our Challenge Success student survey. Just to remind everyone, 481 students responded out of 503 students, which was a significant response rate. And some of the data, I won't read all of it to you, but things that really stood out for us were that 62% of our students feel that they have an adult they can go to, which I thought was a little low. But if you look at the grade structure, 12th graders, 71% of them feel that they have an adult to go to, but 9th graders, only about 54% feel they have an adult to go to, which makes sense. So if you're new to the school, you really don't know who the players are, which makes it more a reason to look at how we can get 9th graders engaged with the adults in the building. Words to describe our school. Difficult and stressful was the number one on the list at 37%, which is disturbing. And then followed by caring and welcoming and small. Stress and health. 88% of our students reported experiencing some health-related symptom, such as exhaustion, difficulty sleeping, headache, within the last month.
We have seen an increase also in the mental health and at-risk behaviors being presented to our nurse's office and our mental health professionals and our guidance counselors, so we really need to start addressing that at a higher level.
If you look at the female number, 98% of our females have experienced it versus 79% of males. Sleep, our students self-reported 6.8 hours of sleep when the national recommendation is 9. Do we feel we can get 9 hours of sleep out of our kids? Probably not. But we can do things on our end to give them a little bit more. Academic integrity. Now, before you go crazy, 94% of our students feel that they've cheated.
Not playing Sophia, though. Other 94%.
94% said that they had cheated over the last month. But let me qualify what they mean by cheating. It means they should have worked alone and they worked with friends. They may have asked a student who came out of Ms. Shandroff's 8th class what was on the test. Things like that all covered under the umbrella of cheating. It wasn't your basic just looking over at someone else's paper. But they acknowledge that they did things that they shouldn't do. And most of the time they do that because they're stressed and want a good grade. Homework and extracurriculars, self-reported that our students do approximately 2.6 hours of homework on a weeknight and 3.1 hours of homework on weekends. which is significant. So that began a conversation amongst the faculty about the efficacy of homework. So our students are oversubscribed. If you look at the last one, they're also doing extracurriculars, which are sports, clubs. It's 9.6 hours of extracurriculars a week. So our students are oversubscribed. Whether that's our fault, whether it's home, whether it's the community, it really is irrelevant. They need a break. So let's continue. So what are we planning? What are our next steps? Well, we have our Challenge Success Committee formed, which include parents and students. The parents are forming a subcommittee for communication back and forth between parents, and the students are forming their own subcommittee as well. We are continuing our high school's discussions on homework and the role of homework. We are administering a survey to parents sometime in the fall. We're targeting end of October, early November, to see how the parents feel. I haven't seen the survey yet, but it promised to be similar to the student survey, but again, self-reported by parents.
We're also hosting our second year of Family University on October 22nd. For those of you who attended last year, I think we got nothing but positive feedback. We were blown away by the attendance, the level of attendance by both parents and students. This year, we will continue with offering it to parents K-12, and also we're going to offer it to 8th grade students as well. We've already formed some of the workshops. We've secured a couple of great speakers, and all of those workshops and the themes of the speakers are based on some of the responses that we received from the Challenge Success Survey.
We're also bringing speakers from Challenge Success. One of the speakers will go over the parents' data from their survey and explain what that looked like, and another one would talk about some other topic in the spring. We're also lucky through the generosity of the PTSA, and we have Jonathan Hawk, who is one of our parents, actually is the documentary, did the documentary on Chris Herron, if everyone knows who Chris Herron is. If you watch ESPN E60, he tells his story. We are bringing Chris Herron here in January to do a live discussion with all of our students at the high school, and we are doing the movie the following night for parents. So that'll be in January. We have a date, I believe it's January 15th. And then sometime in late October, early November, through the Thanksgiving holidays, the middle school and high school will be piloting a 4-week late start schedule, giving students about 40 minutes extra in the morning to be in school. We've worked out a schedule, we're almost worked out a schedule where it will not extend the school date that much. We'll still be out by 3:15, including extra help periods and check-in periods. We found many minutes in our schedule that we could have utilized. So that's something we're going to put into place for 4 weeks. And our goal is to solicit feedback from students and parents with the hope to make a recommendation if it's something we want to do moving forward. Okay, so with all that said, I do want to celebrate some of the good things that we are doing at the high school, and all of our kids are doing. We do currently offer 17 AP courses at our high school. If you look at the numbers, pretty staggering. We had 404 exams written last year for our AP tests, which encompassed 301 students. That's 301 out of 500 students took an AP exam last year. That's significant. And if you look at our numbers, we're close to 80% of our students scored at a minimum of level 3. We're a complete open enrollment school. There are no gates other than recommendations, but a student can go into an AP class at will. So kudos to the students and kudos to our teachers. We have 19 AP scholars, 14 AP scholars with honors, 23 AP scholars with distinction, 2 national AP scholars, and we actually had 2 students who applied to international schools who had distinction from the AP program. High school Regents data is phenomenal. If you look at our percentage rates, are all in the high 90s. If you look at our mastery levels of 4 and 5, you can see that significantly more than 50 or 60% of our students score at the master level in algebra, algebra 2, living environment, English, global, and U.S. history. Next year's slide will probably eliminate algebra 2. If you remember, we have eliminated all extra exams outside of the Regents diploma requirements, and that would be the 5 exams of algebra, living environment, English, global, and US. Global was the first year of the new framework exam, and our students performed admirably. This school year will be the first year of the US history new framework exam as well. Okay, sorry. Just some reminders. That we've been identified as a reward school over at least the last 6 years, and the reason why I say the last 6 years is because that's all the certificates that I could find up on the wall. It could probably be more than that, I don't know. We were a National Blue Ribbon School in 2017. We're happy to report we have 3 current E&L students in our high school who have all tested at the commanding level, which in essence means they've tested out of E&L and are getting transition services, so kudos to the elementary and the middle school. Our students have received numerous awards that we celebrate in music, writing, science research, academics, athletic awards. We have academic challenge, scholastic writing awards, so forth and so on. Science research in WESF, all state competition, all county competition, and all kinds of musical competitions.
And Valerie mentioned our 8 National Merit Commended students and our 1 National Merit Summit finalist.
And finally, our graduation data. If you can see in 2017-18, we had 98% of our students graduate on time in 4 years. We had 2 non-grads, one who graduated in August of that year and one who graduated in January. Both were due to Regents exams. And this past school year, we had 99% of our student body graduate on time. We had 1 non-grad, and that was completed in August based on a Regents exam. And you can see the numbers on 4-year and 2-year colleges. So we average somewhere around the 90 percentile for 4-year colleges. Thank you.
You guys can just give us 1 second because we like to try to pull something up. If it doesn't work, then I can go back on that. Voila. Good win. No? Oh, that's the main one? I'll figure out. Yeah, we got it.
Come
No, this is, I got it.
You didn't take it out.
We got it, we got it.
You'll take a stroll.
Am I going?
Yeah, go.
Okay. Hello, welcome. As special education administrators, one of our purposes is to help each other understand what is going on in the fields of inclusion and remind ourselves that this is the moral direction of where we need to be. This year, TESP and I will be working collaboratively on both professional and personal goals. Every year, New York State assigns each district an indicator for quality assurance. This year, the Hastings-on-Hudson School District has been assigned Indicator 13, which is a secondary transition self-review for students with disabilities. Our professional goal is to develop supports to ensure that students of transition age have a clear plan of transition supported by New York State guidelines. On a personal level, independent of each other, TESP and I both chose the area of intellectual stimulation. It was actually pretty interesting when we put it in, and I was like, no, that's what I want to do. So we agreed to both do it. My goal is to invest in research and theory that will allow our district the opportunity to improve our inclusive practices, as well as expand our special class K-5 into the middle and high schools so that our students can be educated in their home district.
So throughout this presentation and throughout everybody's presentations, we talk a lot about inclusive practices and inclusion. So I think a key component to mastery or to do that effectively is to work with the support staff we have here. So my goal personally is to try to improve the skill set, the capacity, and the level of professionalism with our teacher aides and teacher assistants. I had my first professional development session with them this Friday that passed, and it went well, and we're going to try to build in more professional development time with those individuals. So this was based off a need. I did a survey with them towards the end of last school year, And 35% of them felt a high need area was how to work with the general education teachers. So that is going to be my personal focus, to work with that portion of our staff population.
Test for Dr. Janet Lyons from the high school and I attended a 3-day conference in Syracuse sponsored by Inclusive Schooling. The keynote speakers included Julie Costin, who you see on the screen, George Theo Harris, and Shelley Moore. In addition, we heard from college students with learning challenges that spoke about their past and present experiences with regards to inclusion. Our district has and continues to provide opportunities to support inclusive education. However, even with all of my own experience and background, this conference presented many aha moments. We are looking forward to the opportunity to collaborate with Julie in supporting our inclusive practices on many levels. Thank you to Valerie.
All right. So why is inclusion important? I mean, aside from we all know it's best practices, no hard data that shows that more restrictive environments are more effective for students with disabilities. So if you look at the chart on the left, the first portion, the bar graph, that is our overall enrollment in Hastings. So there are more kids coming to the district. The chart right next to it is our classification rate in Hastings. And as you can see, there are more classified students in the district. The orange, yellow, blue, and purple chart, that is the amount of time students are in the least restrictive environment. So ideally, you want that orange chart to be the biggest out of all of the colors. So we are moving in the right direction. However, I'm not going to insult anybody and say, all right, well, everything is going where we need to be. There's still a lot of work, not so much around the time in the least restrictive environment, but the equity of how students are in the least restrictive environment. We want to make sure that it's a fair balance where someone's not overloaded more on one day as opposed to another day. You know, a brief little story, you know, and so I was walking around, I do, you know, go to different classes, and I went to one of our more restrictive classes. I looked around the class, and between myself, the teacher, the kids in the class, it was probably the blackest class that's ever been in Hastings. It's a joke, but I'm being dead serious. So, aside from it being the right thing to do, you want to build opportunities for these kids to be in the least restrictive environment as much as possible. So, so when we think of inclusion, right, this is like the ideal, hey, this is what inclusion is. You have exclusion, you have all the colored dots out. You have segregation where we just put them in a little bubble. You have integration where the little bubble comes in. And then you have inclusion where all the little bubbles are in there. All the little colored dots are in there. But if we look really, really deep, and when we went to the conference in Syracuse, that's not really inclusion. That's more assimilation. So we don't want to have our kids assimilate, whether special ed, any category, socioeconomic. You want them to be valued for who they are. So you don't want all the different colored dots to be green. You want to value all the little colored dots in inclusion of the green dots.
So one of Shelley Moore's students, and Shelley Moore was one of the speakers at our conference in Syracuse, and one of her students, when she saw this visual, she asked, what did she have to do to become a green dot? At that moment, Shelley realized that this visual does not represent inclusion, as this student still felt othered. So, this is a new way to look at inclusion. Moving past the green dots, you now are looking at all the mixed colors. And to us, that represents it more. So our goal isn't to fix anyone, but to find their color and navigate a diverse setting. So what would you call that fifth dot? I would call it a diverse classroom where all children are being educated.
So this video, we don't have time to play it, but I suggest you guys take a look. But currently in education, Hastings, anywhere else in America, we primarily go on the cupcake model of education, which is based more on teacher convenience, adult convenience, where we have a kid, they have a need, and we say, hey, student, come to me so we can address your need. What we want to move towards is a layered cake model where we bring those supports into the classroom to the kid, to the student. You want it based more on student convenience as opposed to adult convenience. So this is not going to happen, hey, tomorrow, but I definitely think in conversations with Valerie, Melissa, our building team leaders, I think we all know where we need to go. And now it's public, and that's where we're going.
Valerie gives the go-ahead to show this one video too.
Okay. Patrick, I hope this works. I'm gonna make it big. Hold on, sorry. I hear it, but I'm just trying. Sorry.
Can I play it here?
No, it's coming. I just want to try to get the volume up. There we go.
How's everybody doing?
Oh, Patrick, perfect. Oh, no. All right. What I do? Nothing. I'm not touching anything.
Hi. How's everybody doing? There's a lot of you. Okay. So I'm Shelly. So let's make sure. Oh, look, that's Big Me. Okay. So here we are together. We are talking inclusion. If you know my work, you know that this is really the question that that I'm trying to answer every single day. And so my role is an advocate within the school communities around British Columbia, especially. But this is the question: is how do we support inclusion? Are there any spelling mistakes in them? I'm looking at it this big. How do we support inclusion in our classrooms and our schools, especially as we're seeing as our population is becoming more and more diverse? And so this is the question that I often reflect on. And if you know anything about education, how this question has been answered over time is with special education. Have you heard of special education before? Of course you have, right? But the thing about special education is that it evolved out of the medical model, right? And so you know something's wrong, and you go to the doctor, and then they fix you. But we're learning a lot of things about disability, and the first thing is, well, maybe we don't want to be fixed. Maybe we need disability as much as anything that makes us diverse. And so because I'm a person who likes metaphors and I like visuals, I had to kind of think of a metaphor to help me understand like what the alternative is. So if you've seen me present before, you may have seen this, but the idea is this. I think about all the kids in our classrooms and the needs that they have and the supports that they need. And I imagine them, well, first of all, they have to be unsuccessful to get support. They have to fail, which to me is not okay. Like this describes my experience in school along with many others. So I imagine all these little kids, and so I call this model the cupcake model of support. You have to fail, and then you go get sent to the cupcake that you need to eat from, right? Oh, you can't read. Go to the reading cupcake. Oh, you have a hard time speaking or communicating. Go to the speech and language cupcake. For generations, we've looked at our Indigenous learners and said, oh, you're broken too. Go to the Indigenous cultural cupcake, right? So this is what we've done. And so in order to access any of these supports, you have to first acknowledge that you failed. And I don't think you need me to tell you that there's a whole lot of kids who need support that don't have a disability. And so part of education that I find is really interesting is, especially in British Columbia, we're going through this huge paradigm shift right now where we're trying to figure out how do we meet the needs of kids with disabilities, but it's becoming bigger. Well, how do we just meet the needs of kids in general? And in that, sometimes we get caught in this paradigm of this medical perspective. And so what happens is we start advocating, but we're advocating for the wrong thing. We're advocating for more cupcakes. We could have all the funding in the world and never have enough cupcakes, right? And so the alternative is, well, what's the alternative to this? How can we actually meet the needs of kids? But the answer is not more cupcakes. The answer is to advocate for more better. But when we're talking inclusion, the question is there a better way to use the better? Is there a way that we can get supports to kids that don't rely on failure, that don't rely on crisis and trauma? And so, my friends, here is the solution, well, one of many, is if we advocate for more better, we can use the better by advocating for the layered cake of support love. Which is, if you imagine every community, every classroom, every school, that cake is built for them. It's not based on failure, it's not based on disability, it's based on needs of that community. Those people in that community are the reason why supports come. We have contribution, we have strength. Everyone in that community gets a slice of that cake. You would never serve a cake horizontally, you serve it vertically. Everybody gets access to that cake. I have never met a kid who's not going to benefit from behavior support. I have never met an individual who's not going to benefit from literacy support, from cultural support, from identity support. These are not exclusive to disability. These are just parts of who we are. And so part of the advocacy that I have for inclusion is just this whole idea of how do we get supports to kids before they fail. We have to start realizing that our advocacy has to come in, these ideas of wraparound supports, not just for kids, but for the whole community. And those supports are determined by the people in that community, not by the failure as a result of that community. This is preventative. We're talking, like Rick is talking about this idea of retrofit. This isn't retrofit. This is we're baking a cake for this classroom. So this, my friends, is the work. What does this look like? What does this mean? This doesn't mean it's 27 people in one classroom, like adults, right? But this does mean how do we design? We know what supports people need. We know what supports can be designed for specific groups of kids. So how do we support teachers and families and communities to design for everyone in that community so that everyone gets a slice of that layered cake of love? Friends, thank you.
So, thank you for letting us play that, Valerie. We weren't planning on it. We wouldn't have you see that. But this last is, again, Shelley Moore. This video is a bit much shorter. It's it's a snapshot of what we believe our future will include, our belief system. In essence, this last video sums up where we would like to be with our instructional practices to fully support inclusion.
Hi, my name is Shelley Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregate students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we can have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball is the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are our kids who need the most support and our kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to. The kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
So here we are, all of us tonight, as the Hastings bowling team. And I joke, although we did really actually talk about coordinating our outfits. Yeah. But really, together with the Board of Education, the administrators, the faculty, the families, we're all really deeply committed here to the success of all students and continually moving the needle. I happen to really love this quote from the Carnegie Foundation, and this is an organization that is committed to improvement in schools. And it says, couch it in the spirit of possibly wrong and definitely incomplete. And I love it because it really serves as a reminder that we come to this space with lots of different assumptions about lots of different things. And we have to remain humble, we have to remain curious, and we have to see all of this work as connecting all of the different puzzle pieces in support of our learners. So you heard tonight themes of data literacy throughout every single presentation, continuous improvement, and we are deeply committed to connecting our work together as a full system. So one of the things that will need to happen this year is a district-wide multi-tiered system of supports process. And you heard tidbits of that throughout each of the presentations. And MTSS is the broader umbrella for both response to intervention, which is associated with instruction, and social emotional learning, which includes self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So this year, the state is also requiring a K-12 guidance plan, as Valerie referred to earlier, that Jeanette has been working very, very, very hard on. And you'll see at an upcoming board meeting, this is going to dovetail very nicely with the district-wide MTSS plan. So we're really looking at monitoring the growth and performance of students receiving tiered interventions across areas and across the system. I'll also be convening a professional learning committee, which will serve to ensure that our professional work is really aligned to the needs of the system. And it's a place where all of the faculty stakeholder groups can be represented and provide input as to what the learning will look like. This is also a requirement by New York State to ensure that districts are aligned to the professional learning standards. And I'm looking forward to representation across all different stakeholder groups so that we can engage in this work together. Finally, I'm going to be partnering, and I've already started partnering, with the special education leaders to strengthen opportunities for our students with disabilities. This decision actually came really early based on discussions that we had both internal amongst the faculty and with SEPTA parents who expressed early concerns and thinking about the improvement of programs and services. And also, combined with the data that we receive from the state, we really have a strong necessity here that is quite important and quite necessary to do quickly. So Laura and Tesfa and I have already started this focus, including preliminary work with actually a root cause analysis, where we started to look at what are some of the different contributing factors here. And we started to design a survey that will be given to special education teachers to guide our next steps in support of their professional learning. And this has already been in early collaboration stages amongst the building leadership as well. So having partnership across the system and across the building is really important. Scheduling is going to be a key part of the success. So prior to our arrival in the district, Michael Reddig was identified as a potential resource, and he's the scheduling guru, and he's known across Westchester County and actually throughout the country as really being the person to go to when you have curiosities and questions around how to make it better when it's specific to scheduling. And we pressed pause, and we did that on purpose because we really needed to get things in order by collaborating with the administrators across the system to think about the best use of his time with us. And so, for example, now Laura and Tesfa are scheduling all of the aides and all of the teaching assistants. We had to consider the potential impact of the bond at Hillside and what that means for space and what that means for scheduling and all of those pieces. And also thinking about the delivery of our intervention services. What does that look like? And so scheduling is very, very important in moving all of those pieces and maximizing things for the students in the system. So we now have a better understanding of our scheduling needs, and we've secured 2 days in October of next year that will allow Michael to come in and work with all of us in a very strategic way. So in my short time here, I can say that I am very, very proud of this administrative team. I think that what they've outlined for you tonight is incredibly important. The goals are data-driven and very, very deeply respectful of the children in the system and thinking about what they need. And so again, not two mutually exclusive things with the whole child over here and data over here, but really that it works in partnership so that we can support our learners in the best way humanly possible. And so I just want to thank everyone. I mean, everyone's been very passionate and demonstrating deep commitment to really supporting each other and the system and raising the bar in service to all of our learners.
So I'm sure you've heard the theme of what we have to do as leaders together, and it isn't cliche, it's really essential. It's the only way we're going to come up with sustainable capacity building, strategic processes that are going to transcend the system K-12. It requires that we're always planning, implementing, evaluating, improvement. It really is a continuous cycle of improvement. That is what we have to do. This is not tinkering around the edges. I mean, we spent some time, and you've heard our administrative team reference our McCrell balanced leadership work, which talked about the kinds of leadership responsibilities that leaders need if they're leading first order change or just tinkering. Change the schedule and call it a day. We are talking about second order change, which is transformational, which really sort of shakes the foundation with regards to places where children learn and the ways in which we work. So we recognize that. I mean, that was not something that any of us have has been lost on us, and that has to be ongoing. This is not a model for fix something that's broken and is short term, and then we leave that and go on and do the same things we've always done. We recognize that we have to engage in this as a leadership team and service to our children, because our children go through a K-12 system. And whatever we do or don't do will be seen in the data. We know that. So we really have wrapped our arms around this and taken responsibility for it, and are committed to working together as a team to be better sort of consumers of different types of data. And you've heard some of the forms of data used, but we have to expand that as school leaders. And I'm borrowing the work of Victoria Bernhardt, who's really done a lot of work in helping leaders and educators to think about those other forms of data besides some of the traditional ones that we use. We have to spend a lot of time talking about demographic data. The administrative team knows that there are certain shifts that are occurring in the community with regards to different students and different needs, and we have to think differently about how we approach those youngsters. So just in the last couple of weeks, I've had conversations with 2 leaders about that they've recognized that, and so we have to pay a lot of attention, and that's just one of a number of items under demographic data that we have to tap into and be aware of. And you heard a lot about the 10 student groups under ESSA. So it's the same sort of recognition that we can't just look at one piece of data and think that that gives us a way of looking at how children are progressing across the system. School processes, that's going to be very, very important, and obviously the work that you've seen us engage in from the standpoint of leadership as well as instructional strategies and what's happening in the classroom is really, really vital. Another set of important data has to do with perception data and student learning. I think you have a different version of this presentation, but I think the board has the rest of them. In terms of student learning, standardized tests are one of those types of data that we have a lot of, we spend a lot of time interacting with. And we also recognize that perception data is really critical. You've heard Melissa make reference to surveys. We have to engage with surveys that we may not have considered. For example, a student climate survey. We've talked about the use of a student climate survey with regards to perception data for students, for faculty, as well as parents. And that just gives us a sense of the community, the social emotional learning needs of the community, how children are going through the system and perceiving, their sense of safety, their sense of being a belonging, all the things that really matter with regards to the social emotional learning that is just vital. Focus groups and other kinds of avenues of pursuit are also really, really important. With regards to, let's see here, as we have, we're just learning as well how we're using the different parts of Google, and it's on display that we're learning. Nobody's fault for all this. We're learning. And at the same time, learning to use the desktop as opposed to the Apple. So there are a few things going, so we could just go forward to that. So again, we are about making sure that we don't focus on looking at the rearview mirror, but looking forward and thinking together as a leadership team. I think the Roosevelt quote is a really great one to sort of memorialize hopefully what you heard tonight and what we're committed to doing as a leadership team moving forward. And I think that in terms of the very last part of this, when you see, I think, what the board sees in board docs, again, these are the groups of people who have worked really hard with to make this presentation possible. And I'd like to recognize them and thank them very much for all the work that they do. Jeanette are here, part of the team. They've been working continuously, and you will hear from them at the next board meeting where they'll talk more about social emotional learning, as well as the ways in which we're supporting the students around the survey, the student assessment survey, which points out some areas that we definitely need to pay attention to. And Jessie has a role not only from the standpoint of all the wonderful things that our athletic program offers our children. It's a very important part of the social emotional learning and growth for our children, being a part of those teams. I remember talking to students and them saying, one of the things that they really recall is, for example, in the PA system, you may think this is a small thing, but students remember, if you ask them what one of the memorable sort of things that they think of as seniors, one was hearing their names on the PA system and whether their team won the game or not. It was just hearing their names and their teams being recognized. That's a big deal. And so, there's a lot going on in the athletic program, and Jessie will also talk about some of the ways in which the mental health components are embedded in the health curriculum. So with that said, again, we hope that what you saw is the fact that we are a committed K-12 leadership team, and we recognize our students travel through the system, and that they don't have another shot at getting what we should be giving them. They should have one time as a first grader, or as a fifth grader, or as an eighth grader, as an 11th grader. One time, and we have to get it right. And so we're committed to really working together as a team to do that. So if you have questions. We'll wait and listen to your questions and ask whoever you'd like to ask. I'm sure you have
anyone on the board have any questions?
Yeah, I just had one question come to mind. It's really for Lou and Melissa. It was a specific detail around a late start approach, and Lou, you made reference to it very quickly. But I just wanted to confirm around the concept of that, what do we call it, work period, or that free block of time? It's very useful for middle school
what the thought
kids.
process is that the activity period would be sort of split, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoons. The afternoon almost becomes more of a check-in period.
Yeah.
And the morning can become an optional period for students who really either want to get the material again, who have a test that day, may want to refresh their memory before they go into a test, or an opportunity for students to sleep a little later. Another thing that comes to mind is band practice at 7 a.m. will no longer be band practice at 7 a.m. It'll be band practice at 7:45 a.m., which is significant. So, there are different ways to look at it, but we're definitely with the thought in mind of keeping some activity period at the end and having some.
Yeah. It's something that comes to mind just in terms of, my micro exposure to the middle school and I guess it's one of these things to be good to know just how many kids are making use of that, and how important, these 5th graders have become 6th graders, 6th graders have become 7th graders, and then the slope of the difficulty starts to increase there, and having a sense of what's the percentage of usage, and if it starts getting broken up, does that impact them?
I think it actually serves more kids, because some of our kids get tapped out by the end of the day. So
Because
Fair.
they get
Yeah.
exhausted.
Yeah, that's
They're
fair.
tapped out by the end of the day, and they
Yep.
want nothing to do with additional instruction or help.
Mhm.
So I think it's a nice way to serve the kids who are brighter in the morning.
Yeah,
right?
gives you access on both sides, for
And the
sure.
kids who are brighter in the afternoon, so. And it's a pretty even split. It's going to be like about half an hour in the morning and then a 15-minute check-in.
20 minutes in the afternoon.
Contractually, the teachers work until 3:15, but a lot of the teachers,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be responsible to stay later than that, but I know that they would be
They would,
committed to helping
yeah.
those kids. Both ends of it, screw that.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to thank everybody again for all the time and effort that you put into this presentation. And I guess my only question is, of which I don't expect an answer, is I don't really know how you have enough time in the day to do everything that you have to do. It's really incredible, so thank you.
Yeah, I have a quick question. I do also want to kind of second that. It was really helpful for me to see all 3 schools in special ed presenting together, and with Melissa and Valerie. So I'm excited for the next one. I think you said there are 3 during the year.
Actually, there are a few other topics that were on our proposed list, so we'll see on October 7th. As I said, Jesse and Jeanette will be here, as well as the group that administered the student assessment survey that talks about a number of the issues ranging from vaping to other vices that some of our teens across the county. I mean, this is an issue that is national in magnitude. So we'll get to hear what some of our 8th, 10th, and 12th graders report, and then you'll get to hear about our K-12 school counseling program, and as well as an opportunity to make sure that there's an advisory component that's looking at the services and the structures and the connections across K-12. And as I said, Jesse will talk about the mental health component, as well as other ways in which health education supports the goals of mental health, and other presentations across the year you'll forget this, you shouldn't, but this will be, sort of an introduction, and then we go on to a few others across the year, similarly reporting on sort of where we are as a way of, when you hear something, sometimes that's the only thing you hear, and I think in fairness to these hardworking, leaders, it's, although they have a ton of things to do, I think they appreciate, too, the fact that they get a chance to tell their own story.
So I do have a question for Lou and Gail. It was a follow-up, but you guys mentioned the vaping, and I know you guys came and gave a great presentation in June. As we know, it's sort of ratcheted up. Now there's deaths from vaping. So I just wanted to get a quick update on what you guys are doing. I see the signs around town, and but what's happening now in the schools, September, October, November?
It's interesting that our kids are, we spoke about this at the PCSA liaison, our kids have a heightened awareness of all of the health issues that have arisen, and very quickly, because the jewels have only been around, or whatever you want to call them, the devices have only been around for a couple of years. So a lot of our users from last year have made a concerted effort to quit this year, and we've had discussions, and they've come to us telling us that they're really trying to quit, or they have quit because they don't want to die. And I mean, it's interesting how the media has affected them. I mean, it's terrible that people have died from these from the devices, but it's been great for our kids because it's instilled a little bit of fear and realization that what they're doing to their bodies.
There's also continued work in the health classes. So there's a fair amount of education that's being done. It started last year and continues into this year. But I think to Melissa's point, I think there's so much in the media, and everyone's talking about it, and it's just kind of back and forth.
And look, we've been, by no means are we going to say that they're not vaping. They're still, no one's vaping. It's still happening. Not to the degree that we had, I believe we ended the year with. It's interesting, though, the conversations that we're having with students pretty much unsolicited, who have come to our offices or met us in the hallways and talked about the dangers of vaping. And these are the frequent flyers that we had on our radar just this past June. We had code of conduct assemblies, which are not really code of conduct, they're more conversations about expectations, and the students voluntarily decided to talk about vaping as a topic. And they're starting to sort of self-discipline themselves. Understand it's not so easy to just quit. Our kids are addicted. Some of them are addicted to whether it's the nicotine or anything else that's in it. So for us to just say stop doing it doesn't always help. So acknowledging the problem has become the key here, and then we can offer the supports and the help for them to get off of the vape pen. So I think that we're seeing a lot more of that at the beginning of the year.
Also, like I mentioned, we do have some workshops around vaping and juuling that we're going to provide students and parents, family members. I think that would be really helpful.
And we're still doing the bathroom sweeps. We're still doing all of the stuff we talked about last year. We have sign-in, sign-out sheets at the high school, and we're tracking all the students down when we see that same periods. Certain kids are leaving the same period, same day, every day, and meeting up in a bathroom that's nowhere near where their classes are. So we're keeping kids honest. We're still doing all of that. And we've talked as an administrative leadership team about consistency.
Exactly.
And what we want to put, I forget the name, what we called it. You had a name for it, Valerie.
Coherent?
No, like, anyway, we want to all be consistent in what we do. And we don't want to keep, look, we talked about out-of-school suspensions versus in-school suspensions, right? You out-of-school suspended a kid who vapes, he's going to go home with no supervision. What is he going to do all day? He's going to vape. So we'd rather keep them in school, what they do while they're in school, and try to figure out a plan of action. We talked about the course, the 6-hour course. That's alive and ready to go for the first students to catch vaping. You know, those of us who took that defensive driving course, that do it online, and we get miserable because we can't go forward because we just want to get past it as quickly as we can in 2 hours, and they make you sit there for at least 5 hours. That's what this course has done as well. And if you fail the test, you got to take it again. So there's some motivation there. Is it going to end everything? No, but I think we need to come up with some sort of strategic ways of helping students understand the dangers of it. I'm usually not a media fan, but the media has really scared our kids.
Also, there's a local supplier where many of them buy the pods that have been tainted and cause some of their peers to become sick. So they know that. So I think that's been, unfortunately, helpful in them kind of thinking or rethinking those behaviors.
And then it's part of a code of conduct, too, that we've talked about as a leadership team, that, you know, while this is something that's seen at, you know, the upper grades, we have to educate them young. They don't just enter the high school or the middle school, you know, learning about vaping. This happens as early as, you know, 9 years old, 10 years old. And so we have to find the age-appropriate, you know, education for those youngsters. But we also have to treat, you know, vaping like an addiction, you know, and as Lou said, the worst thing that we can do is send them home to vape more, which is insane, but that's pretty much kind of what's been available, and we know we can't go into this year with that as an approach, but we have to go in using the mental health supports and a huge focus on social emotional learning and you know, social circles that Chris described, which are part of the restorative justice platform. All of those things matter, and creating, you know, through you know, the consent to discipline. That's what, you know, rather than a suspension, but an agreement that, you know, we, you know, in lieu of a suspension, you know, that the families agreed to, you know, seek outside, you know, treatment for addiction, you know, and that has to be, you know, documented, and as well as that person providing that assistance to the family or to that child is connected to the school counselor and the other, you know, clinical team in the building, and that, you know, we use Saturday detentions, which I think are horrible. You know, but that is a way to deal with certain situations, especially if you know, if a child decides, you know, through the consent to discipline that, well, you know, I'm going to do 90% of it, and 10% of it I'm not going to do. So we need different strategies and approaches, and there are, you know, places all around the country that are, you know, engaged in the same dilemma, like how do we help the young people, you know, get, you know, sort of detached from these vices, and at the same time educate them at the same time that we're compassionate and as well as, preparing them for life and preparing them for certain things that, are probably making them choose this as a method for treating themselves. So we have work ahead, we know that, and it's going to be K-12.
Go ahead.
Echoing the other board members to say thank you for telling us what you're working on and where you're headed. I think it's helpful for all the people who will watch this and certainly for us. Just piggybacking on what Dr. Henning-Piedmont brought up, I know we talked a little last year about bringing Family University more into the middle school, and I heard you mention 8th grade. I was wondering what your thinking was about bringing it a little bit younger, or what happened with that?
Eventually, we would like to do that. I think we met as a team, the Family University team, which includes parents and some of the community organizational leaders, to make them age appropriate and to provide the number of workshops. I think that the transition, the 8th graders, we can group together with some of the high school kids as an initial transition, and then moving forward. We just wanted to kind of pilot it and figure it out. And also, I have to tell you, Allison, last year, we didn't have enough food. I mean, we couldn't believe the number of people that showed up. We just want to make sure that we can service everybody and provide those opportunities for everybody, because a lot of people were boxed out of the registration process. Which, by the way, once the email does go out, I think it's really, really important that the community members register very quickly, because they fill up quickly, and if we can get ahead of the game, we can add additional workshops and opportunities so that we don't shut anybody out. So that's really important.
And developmentally, it felt different. Developmentally, it felt like the 8th graders, it was fine for them to be partnering with the high school. If we were looking for 7th and 6th graders, it felt like there almost had to be a whole host of different kinds of workshops. So it really was consensus. We really did talk about it because it was such a huge success. And I tried to get in on it last year, and they didn't let. So
we shut her out.
But it's the organization itself who would then help you tailor it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again. Another hand for these outstanding.
Let me just say one more thing, since we
You
got.
always have to get the last word.
Good luck this year. I mean, this is the opportunity where we're going to see you all. We haven't seen you since the start of the year. I hope you have, each and every one of you, really an excellent and tremendous year, and good luck.
Thank you. Yay. Yes, bye-bye.
Valerie, who's doing the incidents of bias? The incidents of bias? Oh, because it's on the agenda. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say they can go before me if it was easier. No one's on.
Thank you, Tesfa, for organizing that.
Sorry, but I pulled up the wrong copy.
Thanks again.
Everyone's leaving?
It's something that we said.
Discuss amongst yourselves.
And we have to do the best for it.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, construction project update. Maureen.
Yeah, so I just wanted to update the board and the public who will be watching this. Just based on the last meeting, our architects came and they presented not only their design work, but they also updated the board on some of the proposed timelines that they had been looking at in terms of the work, the design work, the submission to the state, and what that would mean in terms of the construction schedule. And really, after that meeting, I think, we had some conversation here, and some of the board members also expressed some concern or trying to understand the logistics, especially as it related to the hillside addition and the staging of that area and the work. As we know there, I spoke about earlier, we know there's some rock there, and just, how does that work take place, and, how important it seemed to me. And I think everyone kind of agreed that we had originally had hoped to start that work in the spring of 2020, but understanding it was going to be pushed a bit, and then we were getting well into the fall. of 2020. So we regrouped as, with both sets of architects and the construction manager, myself. Valerie, you came to that meeting, right? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember Joe Martirana, and very shortly after that meeting, and we talked about just kind of looking at all the work and reprioritizing the schedule, because some of the things that they were pushing forward in terms of, if we were to say, okay, well, the roof here is important, but it was almost unlikely that work was going to happen this summer anyway, based upon when they were thinking that plan was going to be approved. So just kind of making sure that the group understood that the priority was really to ensure that the Hillside School and the other items here, because of the time they required in terms of the design and the submission to the state, and that they are going to be by far the longest approval process out of all the work, because the roofing projects tend to be approved fairly quickly. But just to kind of, regroup, and it was decided with everyone there that would, go in front of some of the other work, and just to kind of get that submittal into the state would be, not that means that other things won't be submitted. The Hillside project that they showed you that night, which included windows, the roofing, and the repointing of Hillside, will be submitted. We started to talk about pulling out, currently we have 4 projects going into the state. Also, the possibility of pulling out the boiler, making that a separate project, is something that I think would be in our best interest. And some of it, and we'll talk about it maybe at our next meeting when we talk about financing and the timing of how both of these things work together. You'll see also that there's a timing component in terms of borrowing money for these different projects, and why moving some things around makes sense. And just in terms of the staging of the work here, talking about the staging of the work it's actually going to be a lot easier for the work at Hillside to commence once the staging's done, because it can happen during the time school's in session without because you're not working above people. In this building, the auditorium, there's certain regulations that you can't work when there's people below you on floor. So the staging of that work is really critical, and the timing of when that needs to start, and you're talking about abatements and where it's located in the building, and what that means in terms of getting asbestos materials or anything that needs to come out of that building out is really important to ensure that the timing of those projects, that we can commence when we want to. So what they committed to and what we agreed to is they were scheduled to, with the idea that the Hillside work will start no later than like the first week of August of 2020. That'll allow us the time we need to get the rock removed, to get that work, to get mobilization there, because again, bringing in the construction, you're talking about a crane at that school, bringing that in like the first weekend of October, I couldn't even imagine how that would look. So, the idea is they'll have all the fencing, people will have a good idea of where the staging will be set up, so once school begins, it'll be very clear to people. And the exits, the other big consideration, which was not spoken about, we need to actually do construction in the building in order to prepare for that, because we're taking away the side entrance, which is an emergency exit. We have to create a new emergency exit in the downstairs of that building in order to, if you're downstairs and you come up that hallway and there's that door out to exit the building, we actually need to create. So that work has to also happen prior to that. So those are things like, as we talk about the timeline, I'm like, when is that? We can't just start ripping apart hallways in September. And so that, the good news is we're on track for that, and everyone's planning for that, and the work has commenced. And I think I gave to the board at one point in an update that the design, we will be doing another evaluation in that area, because with the shifting of the building, it is requiring an additional secret kind of review process. It will be deemed negative, we're sure of that, by the planner, but we are doing, I think it's on tonight's agenda, that you're approving a proposal to do the mapping of that area, which is not a total loss for us, because as the architects had talked about, the way the building is being rotated and the way the work is being done, that area, if we were to ever do another addition to Hillside, add 2 classrooms, 4 classrooms to that side of the building, we would need to do that work. I mean, we have to do it anyway for this project, but that work will also serve us in the future if we ever do any more work there. We're also going to get the permit from the DEC to do that work. So that's about it. I'm meeting this week with the architects again. We have these meetings now bi-weekly, sometimes weekly. I actually speak to them I spoke to the construction manager twice today, so we're at a point where we're ramping up in the work, and then, of course, we'll be updating the board. They'll be coming when there's more work to show. They are working on the Learning Commons project as well. They'll be kind of engaging groups in that to kind of get a sense of what that's going to look like. I know they're working on that. They're working at the middle school. We're meeting this week to look with both cafeteria consultants for the layout, the exact layout of what we want to see at Hillside. It's going to include multiple consultants from both the food service company and people in the industry that help lay out that type of, the system to kind of show us, because I think we're hoping to kind of, maybe make it a little smaller than we currently have in the footprint. And what else are we doing? Oh, and then we're also going to be meeting with the middle school team also to kind of unveil some of the ideas that were shared here with the programmatic leaders at the building. So that's it. So I think we'll be having another update from the architects in probably about a month or so with some more designs and things. But I'll be keeping you updated based upon those meetings.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If we could see at some point, once the approvals are going through from the SED and CCRIB, just not the minutia of deadlines or proposed frameworks of timelines, but if there could be a broad timeline of each of the projects as they're broken down, because I understand that they're broken down into smaller projects to get approvals. If we could just see a timeline of what those are and when we can expect them.
Yes, actually, I mean, I do have one.
Sure
You-
you do,
no, no.
but if we could have like a light version.
Yeah, no, I know, because you definitely don't want this version of it. This is like one of the projects, and this, this is just one project here. So this kind of gives you a sense, and this is, yeah. So
Appreciate it.
yeah, so we'll be. I think now the more we meet and the clearer they are in terms of where they are in their process and the cost estimating, we'll be able to give you a much better timeline of that work.
Okay. Thank you, Maureen, for everything you're doing. I know there's a lot of detailed stuff in conjunction with all the stuff you're doing, thinking about the budget and financing, and so a lot going on, so thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, she does a great job, and she loves a good problem, though, so I don't feel too sorry for her because she likes this, and she does an incredible job with it. One of the other things that, we talked about, and I had the benefit of being in my previous district where it was a fairly large project, and auditoriums were part of it, and one of the things that really helped the community to see how it's not just another auditorium, because that can actually send the wrong message, that why would you spend any money on an auditorium? But it really is a multi-purpose environment, and I think, when the time comes, it would behoove us to make sure that we have, video segments throughout, that are available for the community to actually see the evolution of that and how important it is and what it opens up in terms of thinking about, which I know is one of the priorities of the project, is where possible in spaces that were traditionally dedicated to only one thing. You ate in the cafeteria and that's all you did there, or you were in the, the auditorium for an assembly, but we really punctuate that these are multi-purpose environments that offer, a lot of sort of versatility and agility, for students as well as for others who choose to perhaps want to use those spaces. So that.
But it's not a cafeteria.
Not a cafeteria.
No, it's a multi. And actually, we're going to meet with I have to meet with the village in the next week to talk about the space because it's going to impact a lot of what they're doing too, which is good. I mean, it'll be good when it's done, but not good while it's being worked on.
Great, okay, thank you. Incidents of bias, did you want to say a couple words, or I can say a couple words on that? Or?
Well, yeah, why don't you kick it off, and I'll be happy to.
I don't think we really need to talk about it too much. I think it's on here because there was an incident that I think you all saw an email from Lou was sent around, an incident of a hate symbol that was found in a bathroom. I think it raised some more questions that community members then wrote in again about what's going on with how do we engage at multiple levels, from how do we initially react to it and acknowledge it, through how do we then engage with the students that did it, through then how do we engage more broadly with learning in embedded ways throughout the throughout the school district, potentially the community. I think it's a very multifaceted set of questions that we've started looking at over the last couple of years. I know people on this board have been involved in the diversity committee that worked on over the past couple of years at Incidence and Bias Protocol, which I found the most recent one still says draft on it. And I think that speaks to, in many ways, just the complexity of what it takes to really engage with these topics. And so I had a brief conversation with Valerie about it, and she's very committed to leading the charge along with the leadership team on really figuring out kind of what are we doing now, what's working well, and where are the opportunities for improvement. And so before we kind of go forward with a more detailed conversation about that, I think, Valerie, you've committed to in the coming months kind of engaging with the topic more and figuring out kind of where are we and where do we want to go. So I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything, but I think that's kind of high-level framing.
Right, and I think, I appreciate the board, articulating its own interests in it, and rather than it being something that happens outside, but that you are involved in. You've committed resources and staff members to actually do something that many districts aren't doing, which is to actually create an opportunity at the middle school level in particular, for those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders to actually have instruction in how to have conversations that most adults are uncomfortable having, or language that most adults are uncomfortable using. And I think one of the examples, and it probably wasn't lost on you, I deliberately used the word slaving over the production of this document. And, I as an African American woman can use the word, but then someone else says it and is used very differently. And I think we have to have conversations about the use of this vocabulary. I don't know if you caught that or, or what attention you was drawn to that. I did it deliberately. And one of the things that we've heard over and over again from some of our administrators is it's uncomfortable for our staff members sometimes to engage in conversations because they feel that someone's going to kind of jump on them and take them apart, as they, try to work through some of these things that we all are affected by, as a society. We all are a product of what's happened, whether, it's 100 years ago, 400 years ago, whenever it was. And what I look forward to doing is, working with the administrators, Melissa, myself, and Maureen, helping them to think about how do we collectively, help our teachers and other staff members to, engage in conversations with their colleagues so that, at least then it's not the children. The children are not the only ones having the conversations. And Melissa and I actually stopped in one of the Courageous Conversations classes a couple of weeks ago. And we were told that the children would probably be nervous if we were there, and perhaps they would shut down. That was not the case. And they're talking about a lot of things, ranging from bias that they experience as from a religious perspective, or a cultural or ethnicity perspective. So there are lots of things happening, and it's the children are doing the most talking, and the adults are not. So I think that that's certainly something that we want to, to foster, and through the work that we're doing under, PBIS and MTSS and all the work around restorative practices and SEL, that's going to be really beneficial and helpful to all of us because that's where all of that lives. And so I look forward to working in earnest, courageous ways as a leader as well as a member of the leadership team to help us to kind of move past, where we are to where we could be.
And I think that, and I know Allison and Sylvia have stepped up to be board members who are able to engage when and how that is appropriate.
It's wonderful.
Okay, so let's move on to the business items. We've got 13 business items. I have a couple questions, but does anyone else have any questions about these?
Yeah. You want to start with yours, or you want me to start with mine?
You go ahead.
So Lawrence, first round of Lawrence, one thing just jumped out at me that I just was curious about. Aluminum athletic equipment for $12,000.
The second round of Lawrence.
Second round of Lawrence.
Wait, not number 1, number 9?
Yeah, what's $10,000 in aluminum athletic equipment?
Let me just see, let me look at it. I would imagine it's for like track equipment, I could look exactly. Oh, right there. Oh, aluminum athletic equipment, yeah. Yeah, it's for track equipment.
Track.
I mean, I can get the specifics about what exactly was purchased.
It just jumped out at me.
This is obviously a carryover from last year because it just was paid now, which means that it, in all likelihood, was ordered at the end of the last school year, but I'll see exactly what that included. I mean, obviously, that's just the name of the vendor, so now I'm thinking they did order some track equipment, but it may also have other items. I think that's the name of the vendor, I believe, is just, right, is the name of the actual vendor, which doesn't mean they only, they sell like yeah. So I'll get that answer to
That's
you.
the name of the vendor, oh, I see.
Yeah, like it's not a description of what was purchased, it's the name of the, but I know they did buy some, but I don't, they may have also purchased some other types of equipment. I'll have to look that up.
Great. So that was one question. This lyric.
On that same warrant?
1 gig wide area network connection for
Okay.
Hillside. So I guess the first question I have is that effectively to make it such that you can access Wi-Fi in Hillside, which currently you can't?
No, that's a redundant line. We have Wi-Fi. We have a fiber between the two buildings. This is giving us another connection back to the RIC.
I'm sorry.
It's giving us a redundant connection back to the RIC, which is where we, the BOCES.
Redundant pipe for the internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't have if we have an outage, this will kick in automatically.
Yeah, so if that line goes down, because and that line has been problematic, which may be like an infrastructure problem with, but really for years, and it's not the first, we've gone down a lot, and it's typically, it's not an internal problem, it's an external, so this would be the only way to ensure that we have a separate way to get back to the RIC.
Okay. And so, all right. Now,
So you see the cost of that?
Does this facility, Farragut facility, have also a redundant line?
This will give redundancy to both buildings, because we were connected by fiber between the two buildings, and then this will be, we only have one line that goes out that serves both buildings, and then we're connected by fiber, so this will give us another line, just a different pathway, a different direction that this line is going. So it could even take longer, because they have to get permits to, this is like Verizon that will do the work. Yeah.
So then the thing that just I thought was surprising was just that for a gig, it costs you $2,500 a month. What is it?
It's actually not for the gig, it's for the work, because this, what you see reflective in here is we're paying for it over 3 years. It's for the actual financing of doing that project, because Verizon doesn't do them for free.
It's not a usage issue.
No, it's an installment. It's an
Because
installment.
I thought $2,500 a month.
Like, wow, that's a lot.
To just use it, to just have a
No.
line sitting there was a
Yeah,
lot.
after we're done paying for it, it would be a nominal charge for the actual usage of it. This is actually like financing the, I guess, construction of the additional run.
BOCES covers half of this?
We will get aid back the following year by doing this project through BOCES. So we have to expend the money. So the first year, the way we have it is a 36-month payoff. I don't even have it up, but, and because this year we're doing, it'll only be about 5 months of that, and then it'll be for over like 4 fiscal years we'll pay for it, like a half this year, 2 full years, then another half. So they finance it, and then to Jeremy's point, like this year, if we expend 9 or 10,000, next school year we'll get like 5,000 of that money back in aid. So it is a good way to do it, because you do get the aid back, and then the following year we'll get back 50% of whatever is expended. And I know Dobbs Ferry also, I mean, not that it really, I don't think it impacted our costs tremendously, but they're also looking to do a redundant line as well. They kind of have the same issue, and other districts already have it. But I believe they're doing it like within the same project, like we'll both be going out on that same. So I think it brought down the cost a bit.
Okay, all right, so total cost, because we've got it in 1 year and 2 year on this.
Yeah, so let's look at it 3 years. If you look at it, right, so annual cost of the district, you can see it's a 36-month it's 3 years, and I know I said to CJ, this is a bit confusing. I know, but it was the way they were, we had talked about, they had initially had given us something that just showed it, like, if you did it over three years, just like splitting the cost. And then I had asked them just to prorate it for what they thought that the cost would be this year. So ultimately, it's going to be a cost of that, about $60,000 over the course of, to install this line. But we will receive,
net.
well, no, net 30. Because we'll get half of it back in BOCES aid. Oh, no, actually, it'll be, let me just look at this number, 12.
90,000.
Yeah, 90,000, 45, 45, sorry.
So 45 total, we got.
Oh, and then the other piece of this also, which we're also going to apply for E-rate. So E-rate reimbursement is for, and we actually did it, last year when we did the project at Hillside rewiring, actually the building, there's a certain amount of funding, it's federal funding for infrastructure, technology infrastructure projects. So in working with BOCES, we will be also applying for E-rate funding, not necessarily for this year, but for next year. So there will be some additional funds to offset the cost of the district. It may not be, it depends on what our allocation is for next year, and I don't think we had any other projects that would be eligible for it. So more than likely, that would, at the least, it would be like another $10,000 a year to offset that. And again, that comes back in, you have to budget for the expense, but then you get the funding back the following year.
So I guess it's really just nothing we can do about it, and largely sort of a subjective judgment call on your part, since you're so close to Lyric. They're our provider, right? So it's not, we don't really have a, place to go out and comp 4 different people on this. Does this feel comfortable to you?
Yeah, well, Lyric, if you can see here, they talk about the assumptions. So they actually do use bid pricing for this, and you'll see that they're using Best Web Corp for the installation, which they work like with Verizon and however that works to get the permitting and lines. But they do, going through the New York State Office of General Services, they are getting, that's a bid number. So the idea there is that is the lowest price number. Correct.
Okay.
Right, and this is the work that they do, regardless of what your service agreement is with BOCES. They are the one, or Lyric is the one that does this kind of install. So there are not very many companies that will do this for school districts, so they are it. And so they we met with the engineer. He traced the line. He gave us an inexpensive quote, but that one would never work. So they gave us 3 different versions of the possibilities and ruled out why the cheapest version would not do anything for us. So this really will be, a capacity building, process, because we won't be out again for 2 days because, Verizon or any other utility, disconnects the line accidentally, and then we're left, not able to do anything. I mean, there's not a single, system that's not, connected electronically in some way or another on our network. So we can't afford to only have one, line, that makes us, that makes everything in the system run. So this might seem like a, a little whiplash, but, there is no alternative to this, especially as we become more and more dependent upon, services running off of our network, and and just being able to secure our network. So having seen this in another school district, this is absolutely what school districts do. If you don't have another connection, of course, we did what we did, they tried the first method, which was to try to see if the other network, the other river towns were interested in this. So that, again, the more people, the more districts that participated, the lower the cost was. But the only one district was interested because they already had a line, and the engineer showed us that. So there was no need for them to come on this project. So if, you always try that as a method to reduce the cost, but at the end of the day, you're still going to need this. We can get it today, or we can wait until, we have even more challenges and then have to wait in a longer line because they're not the only ones, we're not the only ones that are, waiting to receive this service, and they have to go through a fairly extensive project, and we've been talking about this since July.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, this was something that the RIC, the initial proposal, like Valerie was mentioning, there were 3 different proposals, and this was something that this was from like a carrier from last year. We had talked about that we don't have a redundant connection. I mean, they brought it, that's something, as they look at your infrastructure and you ask them for like, when they're kind of giving you an update on things you should consider, they had talked about that we did need a redundant connection. But the problem is the one that they were giving us was actually going out on the same line, and it was very less but it was like, well, if the line's the problem and we're not having an internal problem, it's an external problem, that's not going to help us.
That was the low price on it.
The low price. So it was kind of like, so that's what they initially, which was like a carrier from last year, which was why I think when they looked at it more closely, they were like, yeah, this is not really going to solve, because their problems are not internal. They're like, it wasn't like something with a connection from our building to like our outside line. It was like happening somewhere in between us and the RIC. So then they re-engineered it. It was funny because one of the more less expensive versions he came up with, which is also, I told them from the beginning, I said, that's never going to happen. They had a line running through Hillside Woods. I'm like, no, that won't be allowed. And because they were just trying to map it, but I'm like looking at the map and I'm like, that's going right through Hillside Woods. You can't put like a fiber line through there. So that's why we ended up with this option. This is the one that gives us everything we need. It's just unfortunately, it's just the route they have to go. It's a little bit more
geographical
expensive.
limitations.
Yeah, I mean, there's just
digging up a Hillside Woods would have.
yeah, I mean, that would you would have saved 10 grand, but taken down. No, I mean, that wasn't even feasible. But just when they were doing the mapping, the way those lines have to go, that was an option that obviously wasn't an option. And I mean, it wasn't only an option. I didn't think it was, but then they weren't allowed to do it anyway. Which
I appreciate all the information. Just looking at the numbers, I was kind of like, what? So I very much appreciate all the information. Last question would be, out of curiosity, where is the RIC?
It's in Mamaroneck.
450. It's in Harrison, 450 Mamaroneck Ave.
I was thinking, that's the Mamaroneck exit, 23S.
A little wrong.
All right, good, thank you.
Just a quick question about the asbestos work at Hillside. Where is that for?
That's for, again, this is further testing that's needed for the bonds, and you probably will see a number of proposals coming through. This is to do some additional floor samples, and I had mentioned not only in the area that we were looking to replace, but also being now that we have to create an additional exit, like that Joe has to actually, and his team are going to have to address. There's some areas that in ripping out floors and walls, we need to do some further testing, so. And then you also have an air monitor. Once we do it, there'll be an air monitoring bill as well.
Can you also just remind me of the HCA contract for school staffing? Is that?
Okay, so this one, I know it's funny because a lot of times people think it's our like HTA, which is our teachers union. It is it's an outside agency, and this contract, we already had signed a few contracts for this type of servicing, but what happens, we have a private school in the district now, the Hudson Lab School, and we need to provide building-based services for children that, whether they live in Hastings or not, we're the district of residence. So in order to provide services, we've had to go out and try to contract with more providers, because our current provider who provides services to our children at Hillside doesn't have the staff to do this, but we're mandated to do it. So you may see a few more of these type of contracts. It doesn't mean we're even going to use them, but we're trying, because sometimes they don't even have people to send us, and it's mandated services. So it's I think that's something, it'll be, as that school grows, we're going to have to look at that, because that may mean we may have to have an increase in staffing and may have to think about providing them nursing services too. So that'll be something that, as that school continues to grow, we're needing to, address their needs down there as well.
That's all I had. Anyone else have any other questions before we?
GNR inclusive group, I saw that on the FMS slide. Is that?
We've been working with them for, actually, since prior to Laura having the position. They've been in the district many years, and they work in the ICT classrooms, providing professional development. And they've been working with them at least over 5 years.
It's actually pretty popular. I mean, all the spots that are available for both the middle school and the high school have been taken with regards to teachers signing up for professional learning, as well as the consultant coaching. So there are two different components of that. And it really is a benefit to the educators to not only have someone there helping them to kind of look at their own practices, but of someone who's available to be in the classroom with the teacher to help him or her as they try some of the new practices and strategies that they're learning. So that's a pretty that's the model that we would want. So when I saw this as one of the professional learning options that was already available in the district, that made me feel really good about that this wasn't just a matter of coming in and kind of giving someone something and saying you did it, but also building capacity of the educators to use those tools and have someone who they can sort of bounce ideas off of and get some some safe feedback that would help them to continue to do the work.
Okay, do I have a motion to pass items 1 through 13 under number 4A?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Why don't we take B? I'm getting confused here. Okay, yeah, B. Placement for services, CSC and CPSC. Have a motion to approve these placements? A second?
Second.
All in favor? Does anybody have any questions under 5, personnel, either A, B, or C?
So on B, Katie Paz, or Paz, is probably the way you pronounce it. Her FMLA without pay just needs to be switched to November 8th from 18th. Just in the.
Yes, because her return to work is the 12th, right. Yeah. So on number 1, her it's October 15th through November 8th, and then return to work the 12th. Let's make sure that's what the note says.
It's on the leave form.
Yeah. Yes, it's the 8th, yeah.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the appointments, leaves, and resignations under 5, A, B, and C? And second? All in favor?
I just want to say I noticed that there are internships included in the appointments, and I think that's a nice move to see in our teaching staff.
Up for observation hours as well. We just want to make sure everyone's cleared and there's a process in place for that.
Does anybody have any questions on the minutes from September 9? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 9?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Committee reports. I don't think, we'll have Finance Committee report at the next meeting.
Mhm.
We'll put those notes together because we just had that today. Safety?
Yeah, and I'll have to give Janine minutes, being, so basically we met, and you can see what the agenda included, and it was our first meeting out in the beginning of the year, and it includes all the building level people from the community, the police department, fire department, and we met to kind of go over with our security consultant to make sure everyone was clear on the safety drill requirements for the entire district. Went over those, went over our building team plans and the requirements for the different trainings that need to happen at each individual building amongst their team members, and the tabletop trainings and different recommendations of looking at the audit that our security consultant had done a few years ago on our behalf to look at some of our vulnerabilities and kind of meet up with each building and kind of address what may have been addressed and what may still need to be addressed. So they talked about that. I'm trying to think what else. The police department, they were saying that there were some things they would like to see brought back in, just kind of having a larger presence at even events throughout the school and athletic events, and the importance of working more closely with them. And we were going to share with them also the audit findings of the security vulnerabilities and things like that. We, of course, have a new chief, Chief Dosen, and oh my goodness, the fire chief, his name is escaping right now, but he was new also, and we're also going to be working a lot of our fire drills. We don't always have the rigs come up to the building, the fire department trucks, and they really want to start doing, they used to do it that way, and then they kind of got away from it, but they want to kind of come back to ensure that we're, that when there is an actual fire, like that where the rigs would actually go, and just to make sure that we're all, everyone's kind of aware of that. So that was basically it, and we just reviewed some of our software trainings, and also we talked about the memorandum of agreement with the security company, which is now, it's on our website. We discussed it. We got feedback from people in terms of what the role of our security officers are in the building, just to ensure that everyone understands they're not there for student discipline, but they're there to enforce our safety standards and kind of visitor control. But that, that they're really not there for student discipline purposes, and we spoke a lot about that in the roles in the district, and this is actually a requirement from the state, but I think it was interesting because we started having this conversation last year when there were times that either officers were being asked to do things, because that can also become problematic, because they're not really an authority role to do that, to discipline students when they're not listening. So, and that was it.
Thank you.
Is there going to be a board member on the committee, or is it just going to be an internal?
We weren't planning that.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Unless you all feel that that's needed for some reason.
I don't think it is. I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
There used to always be, but.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier for scheduling, like internal. It's hard sometimes with everybody's schedules. Yeah.
Okay, so on to old business, policy 6741, contracting for professional services. I think this is the second read, right?
Yeah, it's the third read.
Third read.
There was a change that Maureen had asked to be put in, so that change is in there. I had used another color, but it didn't come up in the version that was attached for some reason. But it's in the paragraph that starts when an RFP process is to be used. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And if that's what you intended the change to mean.
That's fine. Yeah, no, that's perfect, because I think also it still gives you some oversight, like the contract for Gravity, which we did do through a RFP process, although it was through BOCES, it exceeds that $25,000, so I think that's a reasonable limit to put in, and it still allows you to use, for one, there's times like it's very easy, as you saw with J&R. I mean, you can really easily spend $10,000 with somebody, so I think anything up into that limit is fine. We can work within that. Would you agree, Valerie? That makes sense?
It does. I mean, people like Gravity, I mean, she does, she was connected to Teachers College. I mean, most of them are. And I think, when we know that, it's not as though they're a complete departure from that body of work, that, we do need some flexibility with regards to, once we do our due diligence to determine who's providing those services. And she actually happened to have spent a lot of time at Teachers College, so there are lots of people who either work with, Teachers College, or they work with other consultants who started there. So, it's pretty well known that they are representing the kind of work that, that districts are seeking. And I think in a case like that, going through an RFP process is really a waste of time.
I mean, we did it last year, but we're done with hers. But I think moving forward, like if you just get the quotes from a few providers that are kind of known to do the work, that also works.
Right. And we would, the other, I think, benefit is we always look to BOCES. I mean, that's one thing that they provide is, if there is a consultant that's working with one district, and that perhaps we would want to also work with that consultant. They've done a lot of the vetting already with regards to establishing a rate that's fair to districts, and all the sort of processes that we would similarly be interested in making sure we're above board. So I would just say that flexibility is really critical for us because we could lose someone if we weren't able to move more quickly because their schedules are filled too. They're not waiting for us. They have, business to run. So I would just say that that's a really important part that we could defer to our own professional resources to make determinations about, who would be a more appropriate consultant. And obviously Amy is the one who, through her knowledge again of BOCES, was able to identify gravity as a resource that would be very helpful to Hillside.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adopt policy 6741 as written here?
So moved.
In a second. All in favor? This is, B is, I think, informational date change for board work session. Is that,
Sure. Actually, we had agreed at our last meeting that the October 21st would be the date for our book study, but we have another time-sensitive conversation to take place, which is a tenure review, part of our tenure review process. So we have to shift away from that date. And the reason why that changed is because we were still looking at making sure that we were looking at the correct tenure date. Right. And that is how we came to initially think that that was an appropriate date for our book study, but it isn't any longer. So my proposal to the board would be, from that point forward, November 4th is also a tenure review discussion during the executive session. So the next available time would be November 18th during an executive session, not executive session, opening work session, so that we could, as a board group, have a conversation about the book, what schools should be. So that's my proposal for the work session.
the date you said?
November 18th.
6:30.
6:30.
We don't know what else we'll have on that day, so it might be.
We have a finance committee meeting right before that, which I don't think matters, but 5:30.
It's a little lighter in December. So those are also potentials if for some reason something emerges.
So we'll pencil the 18th and then it push if you...
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the meeting on October 21st, then we'll start at 6.
5:30. I think we should plan on 5:30.
I think it's safe, although it says 6 here, but I agree, we should plan on 5:30.
Okay. So, new business procedures for board committee meetings. I think it's pretty straightforward here. Does anyone have any questions about that?
No.
Okay. I don't think we have to officially vote to adopt that.
No.
Right? So that's just...
Good logic.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. Second public comment. Looks like we don't have that. Any Board of Ed comments?
I just want to thank you, Valerie and Melissa, for helping the administrative team put together such a presentation. I was going to say when everyone was here, but it seemed like we needed to keep moving. But I just want to keep this brief and just say thank you. And I feel like you're modeling for them a type of teamwork that has been needed in the district, and I think we're starting to see that, or at least we did see that tonight among the administrators that were here, so thank you.
Thank you.
I would second that. Thank you very much. That's very good. Very good team leadership. Okay. Any other comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second? Meeting adjourned.
I was about to do it.